The napkin sat folded beside the wine glass, its corner tucked under the rim so precisely that Kovacs nearly missed it. Nearly. His clawed hand hovered over the stem, froze, then shifted left. The paper crinkled as he pulled it free, eyes still fixed on the blonde waitress retreating toward the kitchen. 3 words in neat ballpoint: fake waiter, armed, left side. His pulse didn't spike. It never did. But his jaw tightened, scales rippling silver-gray to charcoal, and he felt the weight of the Glock holstered under the linen tablecloth. The woman had written this in the 30 seconds between refilling his water and setting down the appetizer. She'd smiled, called him sir, and walked away without a tremor in her hands. Kovacs glanced left. The broad-shouldered waiter in the corner, Vasil, supposedly, had been leaning against the wall for 6 minutes, fingers drumming his thigh, eyes tracking the exits. Not the behavior of a man bored with his shift. Kovacs folded the napkin once, tucked it into his breast pocket, and signaled his bodyguard with 2 fingers. Watch the blonde. Don't let her leave. The restaurant had been Kovacs's choice, which meant it was already a trap or about to become one. He preferred the former. The Velvet Sable occupied a converted brownstone in Lower Manhattan. Its dining room all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The kind of place where Wall Street traders brought mistresses and diplomats whispered over crude. Kovacs had purchased a controlling interest 6 months ago through a shell company registered in the Caymans. But tonight he sat in the back corner booth like any other guest. A 7-foot reptilian in a charcoal suit that cost more than most humans earned in a year. His reflection in the mirrored wall showed a face that still startled him some mornings. Ridge of bone above yellow eyes, scales fine as snakeskin, teeth that required custom dental work every 18 months. He'd been on Earth 5 years now, ever since the Accord opened the gates and a few ambitious Slithari realized that human vice was a more lucrative export than Terran art. Gambling, smuggling, protection. The humans called it organized crime. Kovacs called it business with a uniform. The waitress appeared at his elbow so quietly he heard her exhale before he saw her. Young, mid-20s maybe, with blonde hair pulled into a low bun and freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. Her uniform was standard, black slacks, white button-down, apron tied at the waist, but the way she moved wasn't. No wasted motion, no nervous chatter. She set down the water glass, pen already in hand, and met his eyes without flinching. Good evening, sir. Can I start you with a cocktail, or would you prefer to see the wine list? Her voice was soft, Midwestern vowels smoothed flat. Kovacs tilted his head, let the silence stretch. Most humans fidgeted under his gaze. This one simply waited, pen poised, expression pleasant but blank. A mask, he thought, a good one. Wine, he said, red, whatever pairs with the lamb. She nodded, jotted it down. The sommelier will bring the list. I'll be back with your appetizer in a moment. She turned before he could respond, weaving through the tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent years balancing trays in crowded rooms. Kovacs watched her go, then glanced at his bodyguard, Reth, seated 2 tables over. Reth was smaller than Kovacs, green-scaled where Kovacs was gray, but his reputation for cracking skulls had earned him a seat at the table. He caught Kovacs's eye, shrugged. Nothing unusual. Kovacs didn't relax. Unusual was a relative term in his line of work. The deal tonight, a shipment of Terran pharmaceuticals rerouted from a Boston warehouse, repackaged, resold to a buyer in Beijing, should have been straightforward. His contact, a wiry Russian named Dmitri, was late by 12 minutes, which meant either traffic or betrayal. Kovacs had survived this long by assuming the latter and preparing for both. The waitress returned with a tray, seared scallops on a bed of pureed cauliflower, garnished with microgreens. She set the plate down without ceremony, refilled his water, and slipped the napkin under the glass so smoothly he almost didn't notice. Almost. Enjoy, she said, and walked away. Kovacs stared at the napkin. White linen, monogrammed with the restaurant's logo. Except this one had a corner folded down, tucked under the rim like a secret. He lifted the glass, pulled the paper free, and smoothed it flat against the tablecloth. 3 words in tight, slanted script: fake waiter, armed, left side. His tongue flicked out, tasted the air. No scent of gunpowder yet, but that didn't mean much. Modern synthetics masked most traces. He glanced left without turning his head, tracking the periphery. The waiter, Vasil, if that was even his name, stood near the kitchen door, arms crossed, shoulders too tense for someone on break. His uniform fit poorly, sleeves an inch too short, and his shoes were wrong. Black sneakers instead of the polished loafers the other servers wore. Kalvex folded the napkin, slipped it into his pocket, and caught Reth's eye again. 2 fingers, watch the woman. 1 finger, find the gun. Reth stood, stretched like a man bored with waiting, and ambled toward the restroom. He'd circle the kitchen, check the exits, and if Vasil so much as twitched, Reth would break his wrist before the human could draw. Simple. Clean. Kalvax leaned back, forked a scallop, and let the silence settle. The blonde waitress reappeared at the sommelier's station, pouring wine for an elderly couple 3 tables over. Her hands were steady. Her smile was practiced. And when she glanced his way, just once, barely a flicker, her eyes held no fear. Only calculation. He set down his fork and wondered who she was, and why, in a room full of predators, she'd chosen to warn him instead of run. The sommelier arrived with the wine list, a leather-bound tome thick enough to double as a weapon. Kalvax waved him off, pointed to a 2018 Barolo, and watched the man's face for tells. None. The sommelier nodded, retreated, and returned 3 minutes later with a bottle and 2 glasses. Kalvax poured his own, ignored the second glass, and let the wine breathe while his mind catalogued exits. 3 doors. Front entrance, kitchen service door, and a fire escape in the back hall that Reth had scoped during their first visit. The windows were decorative, too narrow for a Slithara to squeeze through, but a human could manage if they were desperate. Kalvax's booth put his back to the brick wall, a position he'd chosen deliberately. No one got behind him without crossing his line of sight first. Vasil hadn't moved, still leaning against the wall, still drumming his fingers. His jacket hung loose at the waist, which meant either a shoulder holster or a pancake rig at the small of his back. Kalvax bet on the latter, easier to conceal, quicker to draw if you were standing. He glanced at Reth, who'd returned from his circuit and now sat nursing a glass of vodka, gaze fixed on Vasil like a cat watching a mouse. The blonde waitress reappeared with his lamb, set the plate down without comment, and refilled his wine. She didn't linger, didn't speak. Just moved to the next table, took their order, and vanished back into the kitchen. Kalvax cut into the lamb, let the juice pool on the plate, and replayed the last 10 minutes in his head. She'd known, not suspected, known. Which meant either she had training or she'd seen Vasil palm the gun in the back hall and put 2 and 2 together. Either way, she'd risked her neck slipping him that napkin. In Kalvax's world, that kind of risk came with a price tag. Favors, debts, leverage. He didn't believe in altruism. Not from humans, not from anyone. His phone buzzed. Text from Dmitri, outside. 2 minutes. Kalvax pocketed the phone, finished his wine, and stood. Reth rose with him, hand drifting toward his hip. Vasil's eyes tracked them both, and for the first time all evening the man's expression shifted. Tension to focus. Focus to intent. Kalvax walked toward the front door, steps measured, posture relaxed. He passed Vasil without looking at him, felt the air shift as the man pushed off the wall, heard the faint scrape of fabric against metal. Reth moved first. 3 steps, closing the distance before Vasil's hand cleared his waistband, and then Reth's palm cracked against the man's wrist hard enough to snap bone. Vasil grunted, dropped the gun. A compact Beretta, suppressor already threaded, and Reth caught it mid-fall, flipped it, and pressed the barrel against Vasil's ribs. Outside, Reth said, quiet. Final. Kovacs glanced back at the dining room. No one screamed. A few heads turned, curious, but the lighting was low and the angle wrong, and most people saw what they expected to see: two men helping a drunk friend to the exit. The blonde waitress stood frozen near the kitchen door, tray balanced on one hip, eyes locked on Kovacs. He held her gaze for 3 seconds, nodded once, and followed Reth into the cold. The alley behind the restaurant smelled like rotting produce and exhaust. Vasil stumbled against the dumpster, clutching his wrist, face pale under the streetlight. Reth kept the gun trained on his chest while Kovacs circled behind, claws clicking on the asphalt. "Who sent you?" Kovacs asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle. It was the tone that made men confess. Vasil spat blood, shook his head. "Go to hell, lizard." Kovacs sighed. He didn't enjoy this part. It was messy, inefficient, and left stains that dry cleaners charged extra to remove. But it was necessary. He reached out, wrapped one clawed hand around Vasil's throat and squeezed. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to make the man understand that death was a choice and Kovacs was the one holding the reins. "Who sent you?" Vasil's eyes bulged. He clawed at Kovacs's wrist, kicked uselessly against the dumpster, and finally gasped a name. "Petrov. Dmitri's brother. He wanted the shipment, said you'd be alone." Kovacs released him, let the man crumple to the ground. Reth glanced at him, question unspoken. Kovacs shook his head. Killing Vasil now would send a message, but not the right one. Petrov needed to know his plan had failed. Needed to know that Kovacs had eyes in places he didn't expect. "Let him go," Kovacs said. "Tell Petrov I'll be in touch." Reth kicked the gun into the gutter, hauled Vasil to his feet, and shoved him toward the street. The man stumbled, cradling his wrist, and disappeared into the crowd on the corner. Kovacs watched him go, then turned back toward the restaurant. The blonde waitress stood in the doorway, still holding the tray. Her face was unreadable, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge. "You didn't run," Kovacs said. She blinked, swallowed, and set the tray down on the stoop. "Didn't seem smart." He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that surprised them both. "Smarter than most." He stepped closer, close enough to see the freckles on her cheeks, the faint scar above her left eyebrow. "What's your name?" "Anna," she said, then quieter. "Anna Reeves." "Anna." He tasted the syllables, filed them away. "You saved my life tonight." She shook her head. "I saved mine. If shooting started, I'd be in the crossfire." Kovacs studied her. Self-preservation was honest, at least. "Still, you took a risk. In my world, that earns a seat at the table." Anna's eyes widened. "I don't want a seat at your table." "Then what do you want?" She hesitated, glanced back at the kitchen, then met his gaze again. "To survive my shift, pay my rent, maybe sleep through the night without waking up to sirens." Kovacs nodded. "Fair enough." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card embossed with a phone number and nothing else. "If that changes, call me." Anna took the card, turned it over in her hands, and slipped it into her apron pocket. "I won't." "We'll see," Kovacs said, and walked back into the restaurant to finish his lamb. Anna didn't call. For 2 weeks, the card sat in the bottom of her underwear drawer, wedged between a tangle of mismatched socks and the envelope containing her mother's death certificate. She told herself it was because she didn't need a mob boss in her life. Told herself that slipping him that napkin had been instinct, not courage, and that the smart thing now was to forget Kovacs and his yellow eyes and the way he'd crushed a man's throat without blinking. But the tips from that night had been good. Too good. $100 bill left on the table where Kovacs had sat, folded into a crane with a single word written on the wing. "Thanks." Another 50 from the elderly couple, who'd apparently decided that watching a reptilian mobster handle a crisis with zero bloodshed was worth the entertainment. Anna had tucked the money into her savings jar, the one labeled tuition in faded Sharpie, and tried not to think about how close she'd come to dying. She made it 13 days before the rent notice arrived. 3 months overdue. Eviction proceedings to begin in 30. She stared at the paper, read it twice, and felt the familiar weight settle into her chest, the kind that made breathing feel optional. She had $200 in the jar. Rent was $1,100. Her student loans had defaulted last year. Her car had been repossessed in October. And the restaurant's health insurance didn't cover the therapy she probably needed, but couldn't afford anyway. Anna pulled the card from the drawer, held it up to the light, and dialed before she could change her mind. Kovacs answered on the second ring. Anna, no question, just her name like he'd been expecting her. She cleared her throat, gripped the phone tighter. You said if I wanted something, I could call. I did. I need money, not a loan, a job, something I can do once and walk away from. Silence. Then how much? 2,000. That's all. Anna closed her eyes. It's enough. Another pause. She heard voices in the background, the clink of glass, faint jazz. Meet me tomorrow, noon. Same restaurant, we'll talk. He hung up before she could respond. Anna arrived 10 minutes early, nerves coiled tight in her stomach. The velvet sable looked different in daylight, softer, less theatrical, the Edison bulbs replaced by sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Kovacs sat in the same booth, reading a tablet, a cup of coffee cooling at his elbow. He glanced up when she approached, gestured to the seat across from him. You came, he said. You expected me not to. I expected you to think about it longer. He set the tablet aside, folded his hands on the table. 2,000 for what? Anna sat, smoothed her palms on her jeans. I don't know, that's why I'm here. Kovacs studied her, expression unreadable. I don't hire people who don't know what they're signing up for. Then tell me. He leaned back, scales shifting from gray to silver in the light. I need someone to make a delivery. Envelope. You take it from point A to point B, hand it to the recipient, leave. No questions, no complications. What's in the envelope? Does it matter? Anna's jaw tightened. Yes. Kovacs smiled, not unkind but sharp. Paperwork, contract details for a business transaction. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. Just information the recipient would prefer not to receive electronically. And if I say no, then you say no. I'm not in the business of coercion, Anna, not with civilians. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that the man who'd crushed Vassal's throat in an alley had a code, some line he wouldn't cross. But belief required trust, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. 2,000, she said. Half now, half after. Kovacs reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope thick with bills and slid it across the table. All now, if you don't deliver, I know where you work. Anna's stomach dropped. She stared at the envelope, then at him. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Take it or don't. She took it, hated herself a little for how fast her hand moved, how easily the weight of the money made the fear recede. Kovacs gave her an address in Brooklyn, a time, 3 p.m., and a name, Viktor Sokolov. He told her to dress normal, walk normal, hand over the envelope and leave. No small talk, no detours. And if something goes wrong, Anna asked, it won't. But if it does, Kovacs's smile faded. Then call me, immediately, I'll handle it. Anna left the restaurant with the envelope in her purse and the money stuffed into her jacket pocket. She didn't count it until she was 3 blocks away, standing in the doorway of a bodega, hands shaking. 2,000, all 20s, crisp and real. She folded it into her wallet, caught the subway to Brooklyn, and tried not to think about what she just agreed to. Viktor Sokolov lived in a 6th-floor walk-up in Williamsburg, the kind of building where the hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and the buzzer system hadn't worked since the 90s. Anna climbed the stairs, found apartment 6C, and knocked. The door opened immediately, too fast, like he'd been waiting. Sokolov was older than she'd expected, late 50s maybe, with thinning hair and a face carved from years of disappointment. He looked at her, looked at the envelope, and nodded. From Kovacs, yes. He took the envelope, started to close the door, then paused. You're new. Anna didn't answer. Sokolov's expression softened. Be careful, kid. He's not a bad man, but he's not a good one either. and the line between the two is thinner than you think. The door closed. Anna stood in the hallway for a full minute, heart pounding, then turned and walked back down the stairs. She didn't call callbacks, didn't need to. The job was done. She was $2,000 richer and no one had died. That was enough. It had to be. Anna paid her rent, bought groceries, fixed the broken zipper on her winter coat. For 3 weeks she told herself she was done with Kovacs and his world of envelopes and half-truths. Then her apartment building caught fire. It started in the unit below hers, an electrical short in the walls that spread faster than the smoke alarms could wake anyone. Anna made it out with her phone, her wallet, and the clothes on her back. Everything else, photos, books, the jar labeled tuition, burned. The Red Cross gave her a voucher for a motel room, 2 nights, no extensions. After that, she'd be on her own. She didn't call callbacks. She called her manager at the restaurant, asked for extra shifts, and spent the next 48 hours sleeping in a room that smelled like mildew and defeat. On the 3rd day, she ran out of options and dialed the number she'd memorized but never saved. "Anna," Kovacs said. "I was wondering when you'd call again. I need help. I know I heard about the fire," her breath caught. "How? I make it my business to know things. Where are you staying?" "A motel, but I'm out of money. Come to the restaurant tonight." 6 o'clock. She arrived at 5:45, too anxious to wait. Kovacs was already there, sitting in the same booth, flanked by Reth and another Slithara she didn't recognize. He waved her over, gestured to the empty seat. "You look tired," he said. Anna laughed, brittle, humorless. "I lost everything I own. Tired doesn't cover it." Kovacs nodded, slid a key across the table. "Apartment in Chelsea, furnished. First 3 months paid. After that, we'll talk." She stared at the key. "Why would you do this?" "Because you did me a favor. Now I'm returning it." "This isn't a favor, this is." She stopped, shook her head. "What do you want from me?" Kovacs's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or recognition. "Nothing you're not willing to give. Stay in the apartment, keep your job. If I need you again, I'll ask. If you say no, the apartment's still yours." Anna's hands clenched in her lap. "There's always a catch." Not this time. She didn't believe him. But she took the key anyway, because the alternative was sleeping on the subway until someone noticed and called the cops. The apartment was small, studio, kitchenette, bathroom the size of a closet, but it was clean and warm and hers. She spent the first night sitting on the bed, staring at the key in her palm, wondering what she just sold. 2 months passed. Kovacs didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at the restaurant. Anna started to relax, started to believe that maybe he'd meant what he'd said. Then Dmitri walked into the Velvet Sable with a gun. It was a Tuesday, slow night, half the tables empty. Anna was refilling water glasses when she saw him, tall, gaunt, eyes wild with something chemical. He pushed past the hostess, shouted Kovacs's name, and pulled a revolver from his jacket. The dining room erupted, screams, chairs scraping, bodies diving for cover. Anna's training kicked in before her brain caught up. She grabbed the nearest tray, heavy, metal-edged, and swung it at Dmitri's wrist. The gun fired once, bullet lodging in the ceiling, and then Reth was there, wrenching the revolver away, slamming Dmitri face first into the floor. Kovacs appeared from the back hall, calm as ever, and surveyed the wreckage. "Anna," he said, "are you hurt?" She shook her head, tray still clutched in both hands. "I'm fine." He looked at Dmitri, at the gun, at the hole in the ceiling. Then he looked at her. "You didn't run, didn't have time." Kovacs's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Come with me." He led her to the back office, closed the door, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Anna took hers, drank half in one swallow, and felt the burn settle her nerves. Kovacs watched her, thoughtful. "You have instincts," he said. "Good ones. Most people freeze. You moved." "I worked in a bar in Detroit before this. You learn to read trouble." "Detroit." He nodded like that explained everything. "I have a proposition." Anna set down the glass. "I knew there'd be a catch." Not a catch, an offer. I need someone who can blend in. Watch, listen, report back. You'd still work here, full salary, benefits, but you'd also work for me. Nothing violent, nothing illegal, just eyes and ears. And if I say no, then you say no, the apartment's still yours. This conversation never happened. Anna stood, walked to the window, stared out at the street below. She thought about the fire, the eviction notice, the nights she'd gone to bed hungry because food was a choice and rent wasn't. She thought about Sokolov's warning, he's not a bad man, but he's not a good one either. She turned back to Kovacs. How much? 5,000 a month, plus expenses. It was more than she'd make in 6 months at the restaurant, enough to finish her degree. Enough to stop running. She held out her hand. Deal. Kovacs shook it, claws gentle against her palm. Welcome to the table, Anna. Anna's first assignment was simple. Attend a gallery opening in Soho, mingle, and listen for any mention of a shipping route through the Panama Canal. Kovacs provided the dress, black, elegant, expensive, and a pair of earrings with a mic so small she could barely see it. Reth drove her to the gallery, waited outside, and told her to text if anything went wrong. Nothing went wrong. The art was pretentious, the wine was good, and after 2 hours of small talk she heard a name, Vargas, whispered between 2 men in Italian suits. She texted Kovacs the name, left the gallery, and climbed into Reth's car. He drove her home without a word, handed her an envelope with 5,000 in cash, and left. Anna sat on her bed that night, dress still on, money spread across the blanket, and felt the last thread of her old life snap. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. The jobs continued. A charity gala, a poker game in a penthouse, a lunch meeting at a Japanese restaurant where she sat 2 tables away and recorded every word. Kovacs paid her on time, never asked for more than she could give, and treated her like a colleague instead of a pawn. She started to trust him, started to believe that maybe Sokolov had been wrong. Then Kovacs asked her to deliver a package to a warehouse in Queens. Anna knew the address. She'd grown up 3 blocks away, in a row house her father had lost to foreclosure when she was 12. The warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district, all cracked asphalt and chain-link fences, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one called the cops. Kovacs gave her the package, small, wrapped in brown paper, and told her to hand it to a man named Leo. No complications. She drove herself this time, parked across the street, and watched the warehouse for 10 minutes. No movement, no lights, just the hum of distant traffic and the smell of diesel. She crossed the street, knocked on the loading dock door, and waited. Leo answered. 40s scar across his jaw, eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. He took the package, nodded, and started to close the door. Then he stopped. You're Anna, right? Kovacs's new girl. She stiffened. I'm no one's girl. Leo smiled, cold, humorless. Sure. Tell him the shipment's clean. No problems. He closed the door. Anna stood there, heart pounding, and felt the weight of what she just delivered settle into her bones. She didn't know what was in the package, didn't want to know. But she knew enough to understand that shipment meant something bigger than paperwork. She drove back to Manhattan, parked outside the restaurant, and called Kovacs. He answered on the first ring. It's done, she said. Good. Any issues? No, but I need to know what I just delivered. Silence. Then, you said you didn't want to know. I changed my mind. Another pause. She heard him sigh, low and resigned. Medical supplies, antibiotics mostly, black market but not illegal. They're going to a clinic in the Bronx that treats undocumented patients. No insurance, no questions. Anna's grip on the phone tightened. You could have told me that up front. I could have, but you needed to decide if you trusted me first. She laughed, bitter, sharp. And if I'd said no, then you'd have said no, the job would still be done. Just not by you. Anna hung up. She sat in the car for 20 minutes, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and tried to figure out if she felt relieved or angry. Kovacs had lied by omission, but he'd also done something good in his own twisted way. She didn't know if that made him better or worse. 2 days later, she walked into the restaurant and found Kovacs waiting at her usual table. He stood when she approached, gestured to the seat across from him. "I owe you an apology," he said. Anna sat, arms crossed. "You think I should have told you. I didn't because I wanted to see if you'd trust your instincts over your fear. You did, that's rare." She studied him, looked for the lie, and found only honesty. "Why does it matter? Why do you care if I trust you?" Kovacs's expression softened. "Because trust is the only currency that means anything in my world. Money buys loyalty, fear buys obedience, but trust—" He tapped the table. "Trust buys partnership. And I think you and I could be very good partners." Anna leaned back, let the words settle. "What if I don't want to be your partner?" "Then you don't. Walk away, keep the apartment, keep the money. I won't stop you." She believed him. Which was the strangest part. "And if I stay, then we build something. You use your instincts, I use my resources. We help people who fall through the cracks, make money doing it, stay alive." Anna thought about the clinic in the Bronx. The patients who couldn't afford care. The antibiotics that would save lives because Kovacs had moved them off a ship and into the right hands. She thought about Sokolov's warning, about the line between good and bad, and realized she'd already crossed it the night she handed Kovacs that napkin. "Okay," she said, "I'm in, but on one condition. Name it. No more secrets. If I'm doing something, I want to know why." Kovacs smiled, real this time, warm. "Deal." They shook hands across the table, and Anna felt the last piece of her old life crumble. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a courier. She was something new, something dangerous and necessary and wholly her own. Kovacs poured 2 glasses of wine, raised his in a toast. To partnership. Anna clinked her glass against his. To surviving it. They drank, and outside the window the city hummed on. Indifferent, relentless, alive. 6 months later, Anna stood in the same gallery in Soho, this time wearing a different dress and carrying a different name. The op was simple: confirm that a rival syndicate's accountant would be attending, photograph his phone while he was distracted, and leave. She did all 3 in under an hour, texted Kovacs the images, and slipped out the side exit. Reeves was waiting in the car, engine idling. She climbed in, kicked off her heels, and exhaled. "Clean?" Reeves asked. "Clean." He pulled into traffic. Anna watched the city blur past, thought about the girl who'd slipped a napkin under a wine glass 6 months ago, and wondered if she'd recognize herself. Probably not. That girl had been desperate, afraid, running from a life that had already collapsed. This girl, this version of Anna, wasn't running anymore. She was walking into the fire, eyes open, and trusting that Kovacs would pull her out if the flames got too high. She pulled out her phone, opened a text from Kovacs. "Good work. Dinner tomorrow." Anna smiled, typed a reply. "Your treat." She hit send, pocketed the phone, and let the city lights guide her home.